orange and green colored card border. Pendulum monsters are played in the main deck and boast a variety of unique characteristics that we're going to cover in depth. Let's start by examining the pendulum monster cards themselves. Pendulum monsters can be used two different ways, either as a monster card by playing it in the main monster zone, or as a spell card by playing it in the pendulum zone. While not in a pendulum zone, a pendulum monster is treated as a monster card and has its monster effects applied. This applies to when a pendulum monster is in the main deck or sent to the graveyard as well, meaning pendulum monsters can be searched with cards like Reinforcement of the Army and special summon from the hand or deck just like any other normal or effect monster. However, when a pendulum monster is in a pendulum zone, it is treated as a spell card. While in the pendulum zone, its pendulum effects are applied and its monster effects are not. Also note that the pendulum monster's scale is also active while in the pendulum zone. This is important for pendulum summoning, which we'll cover a bit later. Some other important notes about the pendulum zones is that as long as there is an available zone, a pendulum monster can be played there anytime you would activate a normal spell card, typically during main phase 1 or main phase 2. You cannot play one pendulum monster over another in the pendulum zone, and you also cannot set pendulum monsters in the pendulum zone as well. One unique aspect about pendulum monsters is that if they would be sent from the field to the graveyard, either as a monster card or a spell card, rather than being sent to the graveyard, it is placed face up in the extra deck instead. This contributes to the pendulum summoning mechanic itself, which we'll be covering in a little bit. However, if a pendulum monster would be sent from anywhere other than the field to the graveyard, it is sent to the graveyard instead. Some examples of this would be if you used a field, it would pendulum summoning. To perform a pendulum summon, you are required to have two pendulum monsters in your pendulum zone with different scales. Notice the scale number for each of your pendulum monsters. This number correlates directly with the levels of monsters in your hand, and also pendulum monsters face up in your extra deck. By having pendulum monsters in your pendulum zones with two different scales, you are able to perform a pendulum summon. For example, if you have one pendulum monster with a scale of 1 and another pendulum monster with a scale of 8, you are allowed to summon any number of monsters from your hand and or face up in your extra deck whose levels are between 2 and 7. When performing a pendulum summon, simply declare that you're going to pendulum summon. You are allowed to pendulum summon any number of monsters from your hand as you would like to your main monster zones, assuming their levels are between the scales you currently have placed in your pendulum zones. Now with the introduction of link monsters and link summoning, if you're wanting to pendulum summon pendulum monsters from your extra deck, just like with any monster being special summoned from the extra deck, those pendulum monsters need to be summoned to the extra monster zone or a main monster zone that a link monster